Hey there, people! So today I am bringing you my complete detailed guide to all the Terraria 1.4 new weapons in Journey's End, including all classes and types as well as stats and how to get them. I'll be covering everything in 7 different segments, demonstrating each group separately. First, I'll be going over magic or mage weapons, then ranged. There are a lot of new summon and melee weapons, so I'll divide the summoner weapons into 2 types, and the melee weapons will be divided into pre-hardmode and hardmode groups. And then finally, I'm going to show you crafting and demonstrating the new ultimate Zenith sword at the end of the video. So I will have timestamps in the description so you can jump ahead as needed. Note that I am not including tools that can also be used as a weapon, but there are just a few unusual weapon options included here as well. So first of all, magic weapons. Note that the best modifier for all the new magic weapons, except for the last one that I'm going to show you, is mythical. Otherwise, the first 5 out of the 6 that I'm going to show you, mythical is the best modifier. I will have stats on the screen in these slides here as well, so I'm not going to go over all the stats. Just to save some time, it's right there, you can look at it. So the Thunder Zapper is the first one we're talking about. It's a desert weapon which launches a fast moving projectile. It does 12 damage, uses 5 mana, does not pierce. It is found in sandstone chests in the underground desert and oasis crates from fishing in the desert. So I'm just going to go over these quickly first, and then I'll demonstrate all of them. The Gray Zappinator is the next one I'm going to talk about, the other one that's in pre-hard mode here, out of the magic weapons. It is a pre-hard mode magic gun which fires an erratic or unpredictable projectile. It does 42 damage, but that can vary because it's unpredictable. It uses 16 mana, and apparently the meteor armor negates the mana cost just like with the space gun. It is sold extremely rarely by the traveling merchant for 17 gold. That can also vary with happiness, I guess. I don't know if the traveling merchant isn't affected by happiness, but after defeating any boss. So you do need to defeat one boss to be able to get the Gray Zappinator, and then you can look out for it in the traveling merchant's inventory. So we're already moving on to hard mode for magic weapons. The Orange Zappinator is just a variant, essentially. And by the way, the Zappinator was in early versions of the game and was kind of brought back with 1.4. It's a little different than it was. There is a version still on 3DS because it's a Nintendo platform. They didn't take it away there, but they brought it back in 2 different variants now. So the Orange Zappinator is a hard mode version, which also fires an unpredictable projectile. It does 100 damage, again can vary, and uses 16 mana. And likewise, you can use it with the meteor armor to remove the mana cost, apparently, although that's going to be less useful in hard mode unless you're pretty hardcore about that. So also it is sold extremely rarely by the traveling merchant for 50 gold anytime in hard mode. So we're going to continue moving along here. The Blood Thorn. Now this is definitely an interesting one. It rapidly fires slashing blood thorn projectiles. Again, I am going to show you these in action in a moment. It does 29 damage, uses 20 mana. It's a 1 in 8 chance to drop from hemogoblin sharks, which are summoned by fishing during a hard mode blood moon. And having encountered a couple, it's a pretty tough enemy, very fast moving, so you're going to need to go fishing during a blood moon in hard mode to get this, and it might take a few tries. Now the Night Glow fires 4 rainbow crystals which hover briefly and then home in on nearby enemies. It does 50 damage, uses 26 mana. The projectiles of this one do pierce enemies. It has a 1 in 4 chance to drop from the new Empress of Light boss. And likewise, actually, the Stellar Tune also drops from the Empress of Light, although it's a much lower chance. It's 1 in 50 in normal mode or 1 in 20 in expert or master mode. It fires star-shaped projectiles in a wave-like pattern towards the cursor location, does 75 damage, uses 12 mana. The projectiles are interesting because they will seek out enemies within a certain area. The cursor distance or the distance to the enemy affects the speed of those projectiles. So let's get on demonstrating these things. So here's the Thunder Zapper. You can see just kind of a wiggly little thing. You'll notice it does not sort of zigzag when it's up, but it does when it's sideways. Interesting effect there. It's an early game weapon, and you're going to get that out of the desert, so it's not super powerful, obviously, but Good thing early on. The Zappinator, and you can see the weirdness here. Basically, you'll have different effects with different firings of this weapon, and it can occasionally do like really massive amounts of damage. It can sometimes pierce and other times not. It's a really funny weapon that way, but it is powerful, especially for pre-hard mode. And the orange version, same idea exactly, just does more damage essentially. But we'll continue right on from that, and I am going to show you these in a boss fight against King Slime as well. I'll just show you all of them that way. So Bloodthorn is interesting. You can see it basically has this slashing effect. And I am going to need a mana potion just to keep this going. Yeah, so I guess it uses the ground. It comes up off the ground if your cursor is near the ground. Otherwise, it will just shoot out from you, more or less. So, Night Glow. So again, these are actually supposed to home in on enemies. Obviously, it's not going to do that against the dummies, but we'll show you that against King Slime in a moment. And Stellar Tune. Oh, it does actually play music, too. You can see, though, if you really get playing, you're going to do a ton of damage there. So let's bring these out against King Slime now. And for that, I will also use a mana regeneration potion. I'm not using any equipment that's going to affect the damage output here. So as I get to the harder, higher cost weapons, we're going to need to be careful. But here we go, King Slime. Have some Thunder Zapper. Not going to do a lot to you. Okay. But actually, even the Gray Zappinator, you know, obviously you're going to be in pre-hard mode if you're fighting King Slime. It's actually quite viable against King Slime. But we're going to do a little more damage if we move on to the orange version. You can see, with that, we're actually already getting his health down a bit. Now the Bloodthorn, I guess since he's on the ground, actually, this would be quite useful there. That'll take out all those little mini slimes. And of course, you know, damage output is not the only thing to consider with these weapons, especially magic weapons with their various effects. So here we are with the Night Glow, and that is going to do some serious damage and home in on those enemies. And if we're not careful, we'll kill King Slime too fast. So we'll move on to the Stellar Tune, which is going to finish off everybody very quickly. And there you go. That's your magic weapons. So I'll be back in just a second with the ranged weapons. So, new ranged weapons. The best modifier, actually, for all of these, except the first thing I'm going to talk about, for ranged weapons is Unreal out of all the new weapons. So, first thing I'm going to talk about doesn't get modifiers, paper airplanes. So there's paper airplanes. There's two different types. You can debate whether this is actually a weapon or not, but they do ranged damage. They do 4 damage. They are affected by wind speed and direction. They are consumed when thrown. It's basically a thrown weapon, but thrown weapons now all fall under ranged. They can fall and be picked up again. They have 5 velocity, a very low 1.15%, or according to my calculations, 23 out of 2,000 chance to drop from slimes that are carried by windy balloons on windy days. You can debate whether that's a weapon, but it does range damage, so I included it here. Now, next one, Blood Rain Bow, or Blood Rainbow, if you prefer. Rains 1 to 3 streams of blood from the sky per shot, consuming 1 arrow each time. It's effectively similar to a much weaker pre-hard mode Daedalus Stormbow. So it's kind of the pre-hard mode Daedalus Stormbow, rains blood from the sky, fun stuff. Does 14 damage, 9 velocity. It's a 1 in 8 chance to drop from either a wandering eye fish or a zombie merman when fishing in a blood moon. And the other pre-hard mode option here is the quad barrel shotgun. It fires 4 bullets in a very wide 45-degree spread. It does 24 damage, I think that's per bullet, and 7 velocity. It's very effective at close range, but that wide spread will make it harder if you need to hit a bunch of stuff or something fast moving. but very effective at close range and pre-hard mode. It's purchased from the arms dealer when he is in a graveyard for 35 gold. So there is a use to having graveyards once in a while. You can get the quad-barreled shotgun that way, for instance. Then we move on into hard mode. You get the Super Star Shooter, which is kind of an upgraded star cannon. It fires stars which summon an extra projectile hit upon contact with an enemy. So not just the star hitting, but when that star hits, there's also an extra projectile. And it does 70 damage, 20 velocity. It's purchased from the Traveling Merchant for 50 gold after defeating any one of the mechanical bosses. Of course, that's random as well, so he has to be carrying it. I haven't seen it carrying it in our multiplayer game yet, but we'll see how that goes. Anyway, the Eventide, a bow that auto-fires actually 5 rainbow projectiles for each wooden arrow consumed. So it's one of these bows that converts wooden arrows into something special. Rainbow projectiles, and 5 of them at that. It does 50 damage, 10 velocity, and one of those 5 projectiles actually will do double the normal damage, which is interesting as well. So you get 5 projectiles, one of them does extra damage. The projectiles also do pierce, and they ignore enemy reflective abilities. So that is actually very useful against certain enemies, such as the Selenians, the Solar Pillar enemies. That negation of their reflection abilities can be very useful, obviously. The spread and accuracy is actually also affected by cursor placement and distance. So how far those arrows spread and how accurate they are as far as hitting that target is going to actually be affected by where your cursor is. It's a 1 in 4 chance to drop from the new Empress of Light boss. And, well, there's the Celebration Mark II. So there's the old Celebration. This is like a much better upgraded version. The old one still exists. If I recall correctly, I think it's sold by the Traveling Merchant now or something like that at a certain point. But the Celebration Mark II is a cooler, better version of it, I guess. Fires colorful rockets which arc in a gravity effect and explode like fireworks. Much like the original, except interestingly, the different rocket colors have different effects and properties, and it is affected by what type of ammo you use as well. It does 40 damage, has a 50% chance not to consume ammunition, 17 velocity. It's a 1 in 9 chance to drop from the Moonlord, so it replaces the old Celebration as a drop from the Moonlord. So let's have a good look at these. And I was already showing you the paper airplanes. Obviously not going to be very effective, but they're fun, and there's 2 different types. So there's like a browner looking one and there's a white one. The browner looking one is just called paper airplane. And then there's the blood rainbow. So as I say, kind of like a pre-hard mode Daedalus Stormbow, also kind of metal. Blood raining from the sky. And then there's the quad-barreled shotgun. Boom. You can see if I get very close up, all of those are gonna land. But if I get back, maybe none of them will land. So that's definitely affected by range, obviously. Super Star Shooter. We're getting into the hard mode ones now. A lot of damage. Extra projectiles. And you can see those are kind of like instant hit too. So that's very, very powerful. The Eventide. You can see limited piercing. It doesn't go through all the dummies, but it'll hit, looks like 5 of them. And that seems to be from any distance. Some of these piercing things depend how close you are. But here we go. See, if I bring this cursor in, something like that. If I bring it out, actually it doesn't look that different, but I don't know. That's what the wiki said. I think you can see actually if I'm like mid-range, it's doing something different. That's interesting. Okay, so yeah, it is affected, but how is less obvious. Celebration Mark II. You know what? I forgot to bring rockets. 1 second. Okay, here we go. Brought some rockets. It's celebration time. I'm going to have to zoom out to show this properly, I think. You can see different rockets, different colors, actually do different things, which is interesting. So if I fire these, obviously it's going to do huge damage, but it's a little unpredictable. Let's show these off against King Slime now. So first we'll hit him with the paper airplanes. Take that, King Slime. You can see with his defense, they do essentially no damage. Well, they do 1 damage. I guess they're as good as anything against the Dungeon Guardian, almost. Well, except for some of those things that ignore defense. There are a few of those that are actually very useful against the Dungeon Guardian now, but that's another story. So let's bring out the Blood Rainbow. And and that's going to be a decent weapon. That's going to be one that you could actually use against King Slime in hard mode, or pre-hard mode. Now the quad barrel shotgun. That is actually going to be good against bosses, especially slow-moving big bosses like King Slime. It's going to do actually decent damage if you're up close, and if you're not afraid to be up close. So that's all right. Now, Superstar Shooter obviously is going to annihilate King Slime pretty fast if I'm not careful, so does a lot of damage. And the Eventide, I don't know, probably Eventide. Again, likewise, going to do a lot of damage very quickly, so we'll have to be careful about that. So let's celebrate King Slime's death with the Celebration Mark II. And that is also going to take him out extremely quickly, being a Moonlord drop. So those are the ranged weapons, and next up, we will move on to Summoner Whips, actually. Alright, so whips. I already made a separate video actually about the new whips where I talked about the modifiers in detail, but the short version of whip modifiers is that it's basically a trade-off between speed and length. There's no single best modifier per se, it's kind of a matter of preference. And also there's a thing called summon tag damage, which is bonus damage that the whips will help your summons to inflict on enemies. Your minions will inflict extra damage if you use the whips, and the whips are used to target certain enemies as well. I went into more detail on that in my separate summoner video, but whips video actually. But let's get into it. The leather whip, first of all, is the most basic whip that you can actually buy from the zoologist from after you've filled out 15% of your bestiary, which means 80 entries. If you have 80 entries in your bestiary, go to your zoologist, you can get the leather whip. Otherwise, just keep exploring until you have enough entries in there. So, there's the details on the leather whip. It's 14 base damage, 4 summon tag damage, doesn't have any special effects. But that's basically how whips work as well. So let's move on to the next one. The Snapthorn is the only other one available in pre-hard mode. It's an upgraded whip that can be crafted after spending a bit of time in the underground jungle. It has a base of 18 damage, and it also has a chance to poison enemies, so that's a little special effect for that one. It briefly grants a melee speed buff when you strike an enemy as well. Whips are affected by certain melee boosts, speed boosts, specifically. The Snapthorn is crafted from 12 stingers, 3 vines, and 3 jungle spores at an anvil, and then you're already moving on into hard mode. The Firecracker is actually the first one you can get when you get in hard mode. As you get in hard mode, it's the most basic hard mode whip upgrade. It has a chance to drop from the Wall of Flesh, so you'll get it either when you defeat the Wall of Flesh, or you can go back and farm the Wall of Flesh if you don't get it the first time. It has a base of 40 damage. Rather than having a summon tag damage bonus for your minions, it creates an explosive energy field around the first enemy it hits, and the next time that enemy is struck by one of your minions, then the field explodes, dealing 3 times minion damage, which actually makes it quite effective. It also lights all enemies on fire if they're not immune to that. And it also produces light, so it can be useful for exploring underground. It's a 1 in 8 chance to drop them from the Wall of Flesh in normal, or a 1 in 4 chance in expert or master mode. Next one then is the Cool Whip. Cool Whip. It's a slightly better whip, which when it strikes an enemy summons a snowflake projectile, sort of minion projectile sort of thing. It has a base damage of 50, and the snowflake actually registers as a buff. It gives you a little icon. It chases nearby enemies and inflicts 10 damage, ignoring armor, which is important. It also ignores damage bonuses other than banners, and striking again will reset its duration. So speaking of things that ignore defense, I haven't tried it against the Dungeon Guardian, but feel free. The Cool Whip is crafted from 8 Souls of Light, 8 Souls of Night, and 1 Frost Core at a hard mode Mithril or Orichalcum anvil. So then, next one is the Durandal. The Durandal is a faster whip that can be crafted after defeating at least one of the mechanical bosses. It has a base of 55 damage, 9 summon tag damage, so it does boost your minions, and it also grants a temporary melee speed buff, sort of like the Snapthorn, when it strikes an enemy, making it and your attacks, melee attacks, even faster. So, although it's a summon weapon. whips are affected by melee speed boost. So the Durandal is named after a legendary sword, and so the icon also looks like a sword, but it is a whip. As far as the game is concerned, it is crafted from 12 hallowed bars at a hard mode anvil, mithril or orichalcum. Now the Dark Harvest, this is somewhat later in hard mode, a powerful whip that can only be obtained from the Pumpkin Moon event. It has a base of 100 damage, and enemies hit by it are inflicted with a dark energy aura or field. When your minions attack those enemies, the dark energy flares and damages nearby enemies. So much like the Cool Whip Snowflake, enemies are hit with 10 damage, ignoring armor and other bonuses. The Dark Harvest also applies a similar speed buff as the Snapthorn and Durandal as well, and because of that dark energy effect, it works best with rapidly attacking minions because that can be over and over again used repeatedly. The Dark Harvest is dropped by pumpkins during the Pumpkin Moon event at a varying small rate, so you'll probably have to fight a lot of pumpkins during the Pumpkin Moon to get it. Now, the Kaleidoscope. This is a very powerful general purpose whip with the highest summon tag damage. It has a base of 165 damage by itself and then adds 20 summon tag damage and 10% summon tag critical strike, which is very unusual to give your minions critical strike chances to your minion attacks. Effectively, it is actually the most powerful whip overall. It has a 1 in 4 chance to drop from the Empress of Light boss. And then, last but not least, as far as whips, the Morning Star has the highest base damage of any whip with a very high knockback but much slower speed. It's 180 base damage, adds 5 summon tag damage and 5% summon tag critical strike. Those are lower than the Kaleidoscope, but the base damage is higher. And it's slower. It's a 45 use time versus the 30 use time of all the other whips. The Morning Star has a 1 in 200 chance to drop from Blue, Rusty, and Hell Armored Bones in the dungeon anytime after defeating Plantera. So, let's get on with the demonstration. Well, I kind of showed you the leather whip already, and you'll notice that these do have a piercing effect, which is actually affected by how much damage they do, because you can see that they're reaching out a little bit beyond there, but it's only if they're doing enough damage, the damage decreases the more enemies they pierce through. So once you get to the Firecracker, it's actually doing its full potential there as far as piercing, because once it drops below 1, it no longer counts. There you go. Oh, even hit the last one occasionally there with the Cool Whip. And what I'm going to do is, against King Slime, I'm going to bring out my Finch Staff, the lowest, most basic minion weapon, just to show how much these whips can actually boost your minion attacks. So, what we'll do here is apply Bewitching Table and a Summoning Potion, and I should probably eat some food. And then we'll bring out King Slime. Actually, we'll summon our minions first. So that'll give us 4. And then we'll bring out King Slime, and we'll whip him good with each of the whips. So here we go. Yeah, so, you know, Finch Staff, not going to do a lot. Leather Whip isn't going to help a lot either. But if I bring this out, it's going to poison them a little. They're going to do a little bit more damage effectively. You can see that effect slowly boosting. Now the Firecracker is where we really start to notice a difference. Watch this. Come on, Finches. Yeah, there we go. You can see that explosion. And that's where really he's going to take a lot more damage, especially from those weak little Finches. And similar idea with the Cool Whip. This is where instead you have that little snowflake that's darting around, which happens to be very, very useful against the slimes that come out. But you don't have that explosive effect of the Firecracker. And then there's the Durandal, which basically adds some summon tag damage, but is also just very, very fast. You can see that little Durandal's Blessing boost there. And you can see also that the Finches are doing a little more damage for it. Only lasts a few seconds after you whip the enemy. Come on, Finches, get over here and damage him. So there's that. And then we'll get on to the Dark Harvest. Now again, this will actually be very useful against all the slimes, because you can see that sort of effect where it's damaging nearby enemies. And then we'll bring out the Kaleidoscope, which is going to Actually, I'm almost afraid to do that. Let's do the Morningstar first, because I don't want to kill him too fast. So this is going to do a lot of direct damage, but it's not going to boost the finches as much. It will boost them, but not as much as this kaleidoscope is about to. So let's give him a good whipping with the kaleidoscope, and you can see that little sparkly effect, and actually they killed him very quickly there because it does boost their damage quite significantly. So there you go. Those are the summoning whips, and I'll be back in just another moment with the actual minion weapons, the new summon minions. Okay, so the new summon staffs, or minion staffs, there are 6 of them actually, and the modifiers that are best for them actually do vary. Those will be on the slides here. So I already showed you a little bit the finch staff here, which actually again summons a baby finch which rests on your head when you're not attacking. When it's not attacking, it only attacks enemies that can be reached in a direct line away from you. It's the lowest tier and most basic summoner weapon for early in the game. Has 7 summon damage. The Finch Staff is actually automatically given to and automatically equipped for Journey mode characters, but it can also be found in other modes as well, in living wood chests under giant living trees. Then there's the Frog Staff. This is the only other one that's been added in pre-hard mode, but it does give you some options as a summoner in pre-hard mode. The Vampire Frog Staff summons a vampire frog, which jumps around and attacks enemies with its tongue. May or may not be more effective than the Slime Staff, but it's definitely a little easier to get. Doesn't require so much luck or farming. Has a base of 11 summon damage, 1 in 8 chance to be dropped by zombie, merman, or wandering eye fish, which can be quote-unquote caught when you're fishing during a blood moon in pre-hard mode, and later as well, but obviously this is going to be useful in pre-hard mode. The Blade Staff is the first one in hard mode that's been added. It summons a flying enchanted dagger, which flies back and forth very quickly, slashing enemies. Has a base of only 6 summon damage, but it ignores 25 enemy defense points, so it compensates that way. And it has no knockback, interestingly, but actually a lot of them don't, but anyway, has a 1 in 35 chance to drop from the flying enchanted sword enemy in the underground hallow once you're in hard mode. And then we'll talk about the Sanguine Staff, which summons a sanguine bat, which attacks in a flying loop pattern. It has a base of 35 summon damage. It's a 1 in 5 chance to drop from the Dread Nautilus, which is summoned by fishing during a hard mode blood moon. So that's 2 of these actually that come from blood moons, 1 pre-hard mode and 1 in hard mode only. And then you have the Desert Tiger Staff. This one's interesting. It summons a desert tiger, which pounces and latches onto enemies, but it's interesting in that it's somewhat like the Stardust Dragon, that rather than summoning additional minions, additional summons upgrade that minion instead of adding more of them. It has 3 tiers. When it's summoned in the 1 to 3 number of times, 4 to 6, and 7 to 9. Each upgrade makes it stronger and faster. Has a base of 33 summon damage, which obviously increases as it's upgraded. It's obtained from the new desert chest in the dungeon, the biome chest for the desert, which now exists and is unlocked using a desert key after defeating Plantera. And the last one we're going to talk about here for minions is the Terra Prisma. Incredibly powerful and incredibly hard to get. When used, it summons a sword minion copy of itself, which flies around and attacks enemies. It has a base of 90 summon damage, the highest stated value of any summon weapon. And it is one of the most difficult weapons to obtain in the game. It is dropped by the Empress of Light boss only if you do all of the damage to her during the day. If even 1 point of damage is before dawn or after dusk, you will not get it. You have to fight her during the day, which is particularly hard because all of her attacks will instantly kill you if you're fighting her during the day. So you must fight her without getting hit in the daytime only. Normally, otherwise, you would fight her at night. But if you want this weapon, you're going to have to fight her during the day, and you're going to have to do it without getting hit. So good luck with that. Let's show you all of these weapons now. Obviously, minions will not attack dummies, so we're just going to show you all of them against King Slime here. And we'll bring out our buffs so that I can show you a few of these. And so we'll get, again, I have enough for 4. summons with my pygmy necklace as well here, which will not affect their damage. So, well, you've kind of already seen how the finches do against King Slime. I guess when there's not as many of his little slimes around, they're a little more effective. But anyway, it's going to take them forever. So let's cancel them and bring out some vampire frogs. They're going to jump around. Give them a little bit more damage. Still going to take them a long, long time. So we'll cancel them now, and we'll get on to the blade staff. This is actually going to be reasonably effective just because of the speed. Even though it's low damage, they're incredibly fast, and they do negate a lot of the defense, so I could certainly kill him with those. Might take a little while, but certainly he would die. Then there's the sanguine staff. You can see these attack pretty quickly as well, and they're good for taking out those other little enemies, but we don't want to kill them yet. So let's bring out the desert tiger. So there's like the basic single summon version, and then we'll get him an upgrade here. This is still only the mid-tier version of the desert tiger, but yeah, he's gonna still kill them pretty fast. This is an early pre-hard mode enemy. So let's bring out the Terra Prisma, and this will probably be pretty well an instant kill. So let's go for it. Yeah, there you go. Bam, everything's dead. So those are the minion summoning weapons, and you can see the Terra Prisma annihilates everything almost instantly. But let's move on. Next up will be melee weapons. Okay, so pre-hard mode new melee weapons for 1.4. Well, the Shroomerang, first of all, is a new boomerang weapon. It does 14 damage, has 10.5 velocity. It's found in gold chests around glowing mushroom biomes, and it also has a 1 in 100 chance to drop from spore bats. The Gladius, this is actually the strongest short sword in the game. It's a new, stronger short sword because, of course, you can aim short swords now, so it's not so horribly useless. This actually is reasonably decent. It attacks in quick 3-hit bursts, does 15 damage. It's available in pre-hard mode. It's a 1 in 40 chance to drop from hoplites around marble biomes, usually. There's also the Umbrella. This used to be sort of just an accessory or something that you would hold to slow your fall, but it's been upgraded to work as a weapon in addition to working to slow falls as before. It now does 10 damage, has 5 knockback, 22 use time. It also works like a featherfall potion and prevents fall damage. It's found in wooden surface chests and also in wooden fishing crates. And there's also a tragic umbrella now. Works the same as the regular umbrella, but does a little more damage. 15 damage to be precise. It's purchased from the clothier when he is in a graveyard for 10 gold. Now the ruler, speaking of things that have been changed, it's no longer needed as a tool or an accessory, although it is still used to craft the grand design, but otherwise by itself it's no longer so useful, so they now sort of upgraded it. It now functions as an auto swing short sword. You will still need it for combining for crafting recipes, but by itself it's now just a short sword effectively. It does 12 damage. It's also still purchased from the Goblin Tinkerer, but now costs less, only 10 silver. And Goblin Tinkerer's love interest, let's say, the Combat Wrench now is available from the Mechanic. It's a boomerang weapon, same one that the Mechanic uses to defend herself. It is possible now that it's a 1 in 8 chance that she will drop it if she dies. It does 25 damage, 17 velocity. And there is now the mace, of course, flails, and the mace acts as a flail, even though it's called a mace, but it's found in gold chests in the underground. Those weapons are much better than they used to be. All the flails actually are much better, much easier to use, certainly. Does 18 damage, has 11 velocity, 45 use time. Basically, you swing it around yourself and fire it out. I'll show you these, of course, in a second. And the flaming mace is just an upgraded version of the mace. You take the mace, add 99 torches, you have yourself a flaming mace. It has a 1 in 6 chance to light enemies on fire. Otherwise, it has exactly the same stats as the mace. That being said, it will actually be temporarily extinguished in water, including if you're standing on water, I found. But it's only temporary. Once you get away from the water, it'll work as a flaming mace again. That's the only difference, that it lights people on fire. And then there is the Terragrim. Terragrim effectively replaces the Arcalis when breaking a sword in a stone. It also, the Arcalis does still exist as a developer item and has a very slightly higher damage. But as the Arcalis before it, the Terragrim creates blurred rapid slashes in the direction of the cursor. It replaces everywhere that you would have gotten the Arcalis before. You'll now get the Terragrim from the Sword in the Stone type thing, but the Arcalis can also be gotten in the developer set with slightly higher damage. This does 17 damage, and of course it's stated 25 use time, but actually attacks much, much faster. And the last one for pre-hard mode is the Storm Spear. So the Storm Spear fires a bolt of electricity, which deals 12 to 24 damage. The spear itself has 12 damage and 3.5 velocity, 6 knockback. It's found in sandstone chests in the underground desert, and you can also get it by fishing for oasis crates when fishing in the desert. So let's just demonstrate these. First of all, the Shroomerang, it's Boomerang. I mean, these are all pre-hard mode, so you'll notice if I hit just once with the Gladius, it stabs 3 times, so let's just show that up close. And yes, very short distance, but can pierce. And then we have the Umbrella. Likewise, short distance attack. Interesting that it's kind of a pushing motion rather than a swinging motion. It's sort of listed as a sword on the wiki. The Tragic Umbrella, again, same idea, just higher damage. The Ruler. Oh, that actually does the same thing as the Gladius. It does a 3-hit burst as well, so rapid attack, close range. Combat Wrench, again, just a boomerang. You'll notice this one does pierce once, much faster and higher damage. The Mace, very good for piercing, good for attacking at a reasonable distance. And the Flaming Mace, same thing, but can light them on fire. Obviously a chance, it doesn't do it every time. The Terragrim, you just wade right into these dummies. Do massive damage. But obviously very short range, just like the Arcalis before it, and then the Storm Spear. So the spear itself will obviously pierce. Projectile, not so much. So let's show these against the good old King Slime. Now, I'm probably going to have a little trouble killing King Slime with just these, but let's see how it goes. These are all pre-hard mode weapons. Actually, a few of these might do reasonably, so we'll see how it goes. I probably don't want to fight him up close with short swords. Not the best idea, but you can see the effect of the Umbrella there. It's going to be very hard to hit him with that, though, and it doesn't do a lot of damage. But it does give you kind of an out if you need something to slow your fall, but then you need to fight something too. And you'll notice when you're falling and you attack with it, that little slowing fall thing temporarily goes away. But speaking of sort of short sword type weapons, the Ruler, and then we have the Combat Wrench. That's a little more effective. Definitely, you know, by the time you get the mechanic, obviously you might have some other options, but it's pretty reasonable. And then we have the Mace. Can, if you do it just right, get multiple hits in. And then we have the Flaming Mace. I'm not even sure. Yeah, okay. King Slime is susceptible to fire. I was wondering that. Yeah, you need to learn to use these even still, but they're definitely more effective than they used to be. And then we have the Terragrim. If I'm careful, I can do a lot of damage very quickly with that. But that's the careful part. And then we have the Storm Spear. Now this does give me a little more distance, but yeah. Well, this is why I don't like playing melee. So I'm just going to finish off King Slime here, and then we'll get back to the hard mode melee weapons. Alright, last major segment, hard mode melee weapons. First of all, we have the Sergeant United Shield, which is effectively a boomerang. It homes in on enemies though and can hit 4 to 5 enemies per attack. It's obviously a reference to Captain America, does 60 damage, 20 velocity. It also has the ability to brace for and parry enemy attacks with your alternate button. If kept in place as a defensive shield, it grants a temporary plus 20 defense, and you can also parry attacks, so parrying returns some damage to the enemy and grants a temporary 5 times damage buff for your next attack. It is sold extremely rarely by the Traveling Merchant anytime in hard mode for 35 gold. Then up is the Drippler Crippler. Funny name, it's a hard mode flail, spins around the player and can be thrown, fires a projectile, so kind of like the mace and the flaming mace, but has a projectile as well. Does much more damage, 110 damage, 15.9 velocity. Projectile does half of the weapon damage, which is still pretty significant. It's dropped from blood eels, which can be spawned when fishing during a hard mode blood moon, so yet another blood moon fishing weapon. And those blood eels are also pretty nasty. They're like a harder upgraded wyvern essentially that will attack you near ground level when you fish it up. And then we have some lances actually. So we have the Jousting Lance, which is similar to a spear but can be held out and used for charging enemies. It does 56 damage, has 12 knockback, 24 use time, and 3.5 velocity. Damage is relative to the player's velocity though, so if you're traveling quickly you'll do more damage. If you're not really moving, you're not going to do very much. It's purchased from the Zoologist for 6 gold in hard mode. And then there's the Hallowed Jousting Lance, which is sort of an upgrade to that. It's an improved lance, also used for charging in a similar manner. Base damage is 78, and again, it's much more effective if you're moving at a good speed. So on a mount or charging with boots, you want to be, the higher the speed, the better. It's crafted from 12 hallowed bars at a mithril or orichalcum hard mode anvil. And then there's one more, which is the Shadow Jousting Lance, which is the highest tier of the 3 lances, available only after defeating Plantera. Has a base of 108 damage, 1 in 4 chance to drop from giant cursed skulls in the dungeon after defeating Plantera, nearly double the chance in expert or master mode. So yeah, pretty good drop rate there. And then you have the Starlight, which is essentially a sword, but well, it looks like a sword, but it fires out beams of light. It's sort of like a very rapidly attacking short sword, but effectively longer. Has infinite piercing, so it can destroy groups or multi-part enemies very quickly. Does 70 damage, 1 in 4 chance to be dropped by the Empress of Light boss. And then, of course, there's the Zenith, but I'm going to come back to that one. So let's first demonstrate these things. So first up, the Sergeant United Shield. You can see, it looks like a simple boomerang, but it will home in on enemies, and it will hit quite a few. So there's that, and actually I should show you the other thing here, which is, doesn't look like much, but basically, it's right-click on PC, but it'll be your open or use button on other platforms, and basically that'll brace you for attacks, and you can parry attacks with that. And then we have the Drippler Crippler. So again, very powerful flail type weapon. You can see the sort of thing going off the end there. And then you have the Jousting Lance. So as I say, if I just hold this, it's not going to do a lot, but even if I'm just moving a bit, that damage is increased a lot, and if I'm moving faster, that damage is going to be increased even more. Although I'm bouncing off the dummies there, but same idea with the Hallowed Lance. Again, definitely much higher defense if I'm moving, and the faster I'm moving, the more damage, the more damage that's going to do. And you can see if I get at that initial hit there, it does far more damage, so there's that. And then finally we have the Starlight, which, as I say, does incredibly massive piercing damage, and that can be incredibly very powerful, obviously, just incredible fast damage. Now you'll notice the Zenith is missing here because I'm going to show you crafting the Zenith, which is going to be a little complicated, so just one sec. Oops, I almost forgot to demonstrate those against King Slime, so let's do that. These are certainly powerful enough to do some good damage. You notice that this can only hit when it's passing through him, so it's more useful actually against multiple enemies. You'll notice as soon as these slimes are here, it's going to hit them as well. So that was the Sergeant United Shield, and then we have the Drippler Crippler. It's actually quite powerful and available pretty early in hard mode, so if you can defeat one of those eels. Now, obviously the Jousting Lance is going to require me to put myself in a bit of danger, and same with the other ones. But you can also see how that kind of works as far as stabbing through a bunch of enemies there, and then we have the Shadowed Jousting Lance. So if you use it right, it can do all right. Like that. Try not to get myself killed. And then, of course, we have the Starlight, which should finish him off pretty quick, along with all of his slimes. There you go. Starlight is very, very powerful. So, as I say, next up is going to be crafting the Zenith. So, the Zenith. The Zenith is officially very much so the ultimate sword now in Terraria with 1.4. It auto-swings, it auto-targets, and it fires projectile swords. Not just one type, it fires all of the swords that it's made up of. So that's a lot, by the way. We're going to talk about that in 1 second. It does 190 damage is the base damage. It has 14% critical strike, 30 use time, 32 velocity. It requires 14 different items to craft, making it the most complex crafted item in the game, which is pretty suitable given, you know, that it's the ultimate sword and the sort of final thing in the sense that the Terrorblade once was long ago. So let's talk about that now. Crafting the Zenith is very complicated. The short version is that top side, top line there. Those are all the base swords you need to have. But one of those is the Terrorblade. So if you are not familiar, if you are, then you can just go ahead and gather those swords. If you're not, that's what the chart at the bottom is for, to show you all of the materials, all of the swords you'll need to craft along the way to get all of that. And the most complicated component of that is the Terrorblade. So you need a copper short sword, you need a Star Fury, you need an enchanted sword, you need a Beekeeper, you need the Terrorblade itself, which is also made up of a bunch of other things. You need the Seedler, the Horseman's Blade, the Influx Waver, the Star Wrath, and the Meowmere, and you need to put them all together at a hard mode Mithril or Orichalcum Anvil in the end. But to get there, you're going to need to do a bunch of things. So let's just have a look at this. I'm actually going to show you. I am down here in the Crimson. You can do this Crimson or Corruption. You will need to have an altar. It doesn't have to be in the Crimson or Corruption, but you'll need a demon altar or a Crimson altar to craft the Knight's Edge, of course. And you'll also need an anvil to craft some of these swords. So I just wanted to literally show you crafting everything that's necessary to get to this point. So first of all, the copper short sword at the anvil, 7 bars. Of course, you'll usually already start with one. There's also the Star Fury, which you get on floating islands. You can also now get it in sky crates from fishing in sky lakes. And then, of course, you need the enchanted sword, which thankfully, other than getting it in sword shrines, which is the classic way, you can now also get the enchanted sword in golden crates from fishing. So if you don't find one in your world, then you can look for one. Then you're more likely to get actually the Blade of Grass, or to be able to craft it before you actually get the Beekeeper. So I probably should have put that in a different order, but it's 12 jungle spores and 12 stingers. Craft the Blade of Grass. And actually that's probably also after you would craft either the Light's Bane or the Blood Butcherer. You need one of these, not both, but I brought them both just to show you. So 10 Demonite bars to craft the Light's Bane. 10 Crimtane bars to craft the Blood Butcherer, depending whether you're in a Corruption or Crimson world. And then you'll need the, again, the Beekeeper you'll need later when you finally craft this, but you can do this obviously all along the way. You can collect these. These are all pre-hard mode: Copper Short Sword, Star Fury, Enchanted Sword, these swords, and also the Fiery Great Sword, which together, these 4 swords, either the Lightsbane or the Blood Butcher with the Blade of Grass, the Fiery Greatsword using Hellstone bars, the Muramasa from the dungeon, those 4, not the Beekeeper, are used to craft the Knight's Edge. So you'll see I have the 2 different recipes here, depending which evil I have, essentially. We'll do that one because it was shameful anyway, so we don't need that anymore. And then there's going to be the Beekeeper, and then once you get into hard mode, you're going to want to upgrade your Knight's Edge to a true Knight's Edge with a broken hero sword from the solar eclipse. So bam, we'll do that. You're also going to want an Excalibur, which itself is crafted from hallowed bars, and of course you're going to need to defeat 1 or more of the mechanical bosses to get that, and then you're going to need another one of those broken hero swords to upgrade that to the true Excalibur, and then you're going to combine the true Knight's Edge and the true Excalibur into the Terra Blade, and then now you're going to collect the rest of these through the rest of the game: the Seedler from Plantera, the Horseman's Blade from Pumpkins and the Pumpkin Moon, the Influx Waver from Martians in the Martian Madness event, the Star Wrath drops from Moonlord himself, as does the Meowmere. So you're going to need to fight Moonlord at least twice to get both of these swords, and probably a lot more than that. And then finally, you can combine all of these: Copper Short Sword, Enchanted Sword, Beekeeper, Star Fury, Seedler, Horseman's Blade, Influx Waver, Star Wrath, Meowmere, and that Terra Blade that took so much to make itself, into the Zenith. And that is the Zenith, and it is fancy. So let's go back and let's demonstrate the Zenith in use now. I'll just head back over to my little arena here. And first of all, we'll show you what it does to dummies. If these dummies could die, they'd be dead. Bam! Zenith, slicing it up. So, let's bring out King Slime and see how he does, right? Here we go, King Slime. I think you're not going to live very long, King Slime. Are you ready for this, King Slime? You wanna spit out a couple little slimes, maybe? Boom, dead. And that is how incredibly powerful the Zenith is. So, hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.